All right, well, good evening. I know that there is a lot of anxiety, so I'll tell you right off the bat, we have good news. But don't stop listening, because what you're going to hear tonight is really important. I want to share first that I think Vice Chair and Supervisor Geronimo Vasquez, he was going to try to join us tonight, but I think that he got wrapped up in another situation. So, but we're going to, of course, forge ahead here. What I really want to kick it off with talking about what's really transpired over the last 3 to 4 weeks since we met, what's really transpired. And I will say that this has been the most challenging engineering exercise that we've undertaken, bar nothing for Schultz. That this was just a huge engineering challenge. And I just really want everybody to understand and recognize that the engineering team would have had full right to throw in the towel about 2 to 3 weeks ago and say, we're not going to get there, we need another 6 months, and been well within reason to have done that, given the challenges and constraints that we have in this corridor. And of course, this is one of the constraints, is the amount of water that's coming through, but a lot of the other all right, Sean, what did I do? Get back to here, I'm sorry. There. Now, did that work? There we go. That just a tremendous amount of constraints that we're dealing with. Foremost is that we really, really want to get something done before monsoon. And what that meant is that the constraint of the existing easement and staying within that footprint so that we didn't have to go down a very long multi-month process with getting the NEPA approvals and a number of other things that would have gone with that process, all new easements, et cetera. We had to live within that constraint if we were going to get something done before monsoon. And I think everybody should probably be aware of that already. And certainly, another dynamic that everybody's well aware of is how, with this volume of water, how much flooding is going down the west side and the east side now. And when you run the no adverse impact analysis, that's what you're in a balancing act, because you're looking at that the current physical dynamics and where water is going, and you have to measure what you do against that, right, to make sure that you're not having either upstream or downstream impact. So that meant that, in effect, we have to pretty precisely try to balance the water east side through the channel, which now west side through a storm drain. And that really presented a lot of challenge. And I think Corey, has run the NAI, the no adverse impact modeling, probably 10 to 15 times easily. Because every time you make any kind of change to that engineering plan, he's got to rerun it. And then you rerun it and you look at, okay, what pieces got resolved through that step, and now what pieces are there other issues that then, and you're just trying to chip away at every dynamic that's taking place in a very literally fluid situation, right? And this really became quite a process, and frankly, not until yesterday were we able to run the model and it actually showed no adverse impacts. And so it's been, a very much of a challenge, but we are we are there. We're going to share that with you tonight. But, you know, I want you to know that if it hadn't have been for this team, that wouldn't have happened. Most teams would have just said, hey, we got to take more time. We got to step back, and would have punted. And they didn't. They hung in there working nights, weekends, everything to bring this together. So I'm extremely grateful for everybody and all the work that everybody's put into this. And we've been from an iteration that was down at 500 to 600 CFS, back up to 1,400 and back and forth. It's been really a challenge. So, but like always, some key points to remember. Whatever, you know, now that we have a plan and we're going to move ahead with that plan, this plan will not mitigate every flood event, every rainfall event. And it will certainly help to a large degree. It's going to help, but it will not eliminate all flooding. And there will still be flooding, particularly in obviously the larger events. And now we have the constraint of construction. Fortunately, we got the A team with Tiffany, and they're putting together a plan to get into construction and move that forward. And we do have another set of non-engineering issues that we need to resolve. We still need the final approval on the limited NEPA that we did, and we still need the final approval for NEPA on forest. But we're getting very close on both those, is the hope. And we can start work in some areas, but not in others, based on those approvals. So one thing that and I'll reiterate this at the end as well, is that during construction, let him do his job. As I know everybody wants to be a contractor and everybody wants to be an engineer when we get into construction. He needs every minute of every day to be able to focus on getting this done, or it won't get done. I don't think there's frankly any way he'll get it done before monsoon. He will be working into monsoon. But if there's anybody that can get it done, it is that team. And we all know that. You all know that. They've been through all this with you, and they're not going anywhere. And he's got a great plan, and you know they're going to execute it to the best ability they can. And just, you know, I know it gets frustrating to have the construction going on. It's frustrating. It's messy. It's inconvenient. I get that. But try to, every time you think that, think, but it will be better at the end. And so try to, and we've asked for a lot of patience, but please try to be patient, particularly with them. You know, they're really trying to do a job. If you've got an issue, email us. Call it, you know, we'll try to work through that. But really, you know, they're on your team. We are on your team. Let us do the job and we'll get there. So with that, in looking at the modeling, we had another discussion this morning about which individual properties are likely to need longer term some level of mitigation on the property for the home. And so we're working, some of you already know we're working with you on those plans. Some may not yet know, and we're going to be communicating with you that we'll need to do that. Because we're going through, this is some of those other points that I made. We're continuing to evaluate that now that the engineering and the modeling for that engineering is done. We're going through and evaluating the properties, and we'll identify which ones we believe. And that is a decision that you will make. If you say, hey, I'm good with what I have right now and I don't want any longer term mitigation on my property, that's your decision. Those measures will be done through what's called a cooperator agreement. And basically what a cooperator agreement says that you're going to give us the ability to come onto your property, and primarily it would be barrier with berming. It's a berm structure that's built with barrier underneath in most of the cases. There may also be some specific type of grading or removing some of the excess material that's on your property now so that any overflow flows properly through the system and that we're fully utilizing the system that we'll construct. So this is all, we call them integrated mitigation areas because although the work is on your specific property, it is going to support the overall system that's being constructed. So, you know, if we have identified your property and we've identified some measures that we think would be of value to adding some additional mitigation to your home, then we will approach you about that and you'll review that with the engineer and you'll decide whether you want to go forward with that or not. There are some properties where, frankly, you may perceive that you need something where the modeling doesn't show that you do, and we have very limited funds, so we're going to focus on those properties where there could be some level of continuing risk, particularly in the larger events that will exceed, you know, what we were able to design to. So, but irrespective of all that, everybody in this corridor that has any form of mitigation now, whether it's sandbags, barriers, keep your mitigation through at least this next summer. Do not remove your mitigation. That's my strong recommendation. I mean, again, that's your decision, but we need to see how everything performs through this summer, and there may be some tweaking that's needed. You know, nothing's necessary. You know, we're not, you know, perfection is something God provides, not us, right, as humans. So, you know, hang in there with us, but keep your mitigation because last year, remember, the largest storm event we recorded, rainfall event we recorded was a 10-year event. So we could get much more significant events. And hopefully we'll be able to complete the mitigation and they'll be, even with those larger events, this will have a positive impact. So, I think that's it for some of my intro comments, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan. And you can grab the mic there, and then that's yours.
Does this work?
Is it? I think you have to, there you go, turn it on. Is it on now?
That work now?
Great. There we go.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for your interest. So, as you know, our portion of this is to work on the forest, and the purpose of working on the forest is to really reduce the amount of sediment that makes it off the forest and starts clogging up all the infrastructure that's made to carry the water. And so that said, our plan for the on-forest work has not changed up in this area up here. So this is, we didn't put a scale on this, but this is probably over 2 miles of channel work and fan work up on the forests. We have a large, we have the opportunity to build a very large alluvial fan right here. There's a lot of sediment that comes out of these high, steep places up in the wilderness areas, and we have an opportunity to stop that and also to arrest the sediment that's currently coming out of the fan right now. And so that fan is about 2,200 feet long. It's the end of the 553 road, and we are getting ready to, we have a design for building that. And so we pile up a bunch of sediment there that comes off the side of the mountain. And then we have this 1.5 mile stretch of incised channel down through here. Those channel banks are 10 feet tall in places. They are supplying an awful lot of sediment. And our plan through here is to keep this as a transport zone, not stack sediment up in it, but to prevent more sediment from coming out. So it's channel stabilization. Crossvein weirs, toe rock, and sills to keep the channel from incising further. Whenever we have a chance, we'll be knocking the banks back so that they're not vertically sloped, and we have a little bit more floodplain, so we can take the shear stress off of that system, pass water through it, and get it down into here. And this is where you guys are and where you're going to see, where you will actually see most of the activity. So this watershed does not have a lot of opportunities to build alluvial fans. It's not like Campbell or Paintbrush or those areas that have these super long alluvial fans. We're able to get a long one at the top, and then it doesn't happen again until down here, and this is the alluvial fan on down into the park. This will be the 420 road right here. We have been able to figure out how we're going to take that channel and terminate it into an alluvial fan till it hits the bedrock sill here at the old railroad grade, drop it down again through the railroad grade and the bedrock section, and then open up this fan again, which is what we had worked on previously during the Schultz. So we get about another 600 feet of fan up here that can arrest sediment. It'll help keep the road in place too, because right now it's in sized place, cuts through the road every time. We're going to build that road up, turn it into the fan grade, and all of this becomes fan, and this is our initial knockout of whatever's coming out of the incised channel above it. Comes through here, goes into a borrow trench at the top, which spreads this over. The original alluvial fan, you can't quite see, we've taken it off of here, but the width of it was about maybe a half to a third as wide as what we're planning right now. So it gets expanded out greatly towards the highway over into here, and then we're limited by some cultural sites and the highway berm over here. There's a terminal trench right here, which I can explain in a little bit more detail. The terminal trench does basically the same job as it's done before, but it's been redesigned so that we can create the current terminal trench. The shear stress goes to zero when it pools up. It's just a lake. And then there's an outlet that lets flow out of it. This terminal trench is designed to have a moderate amount of shear stress to help keep itself clear, so it doesn't pile up and completely go away in the initial flood when we have a lot of sediment. We are able to utilize this long reach right here into alluvial fan as well. So this can continue coming, and we allow water and sediment to come down here and settle out over here. Previously, it was a pretty big, wide area, but it was never designed as an alluvial fan. It was just a way for water to spill past the trench and do basically what it did before. We are turning it into a very long alluvial fan, and then there's a secondary trench right here to collect this water, get it off the forest property, and into a drain system, which Chris will tell you about in a minute. So there are bigger sheets than this back here if you guys want to geek out on this later this evening. This is what the current alluvial fan will be rebuilt to. Okay, this is the terminal trench. You'll notice when you get close to it, it's a lot more complicated than the last one. And Mike Kearley, our lead engineer, was given the night off to go home and get some rest, because this turns out to be really difficult, because we have to meter some water this way, a lot of water this way, but not too much to overwhelm this channel. And then we have to allow water and sediment to go this way and get into the storm drain system on the other side, and split those big flows in different places and make sure that they go in the right place. This terminal trench does that and allows this to keep clear. This has a ledge on it, which water will come down, drop a bunch of sediment here, and then be allowed to keep going. And between Mike and Corey, there's probably 1,000 hours or better into this design to make this thing work. This is, once we come down that western extension of the alluvial fan, that doesn't take nearly as much water. We have this terminal trench here, and then an open channel with grade control in it that leads out and into the storm drain system that Chris will tell you about later. We've modeled all of this here. It can spill at sometimes we're kind of managing to keep shear stresses low and keep most of that water going slow, and that would spill out at those super high flows. But that's what we're looking at. And I'll turn it over to Chris and Corey. Thank you. Thanks, sir.
All right, thank you all. It's good to see you all again. I think you all know me. So a good way to think about it, everything that Alan's doing, everything that's happening on the forest, like he said, you know, he's trying to arrest sediment up on the forest. He's trying to keep all the sediment up on the forest. He's trying to spread the water out, to slow it down, and to let that sediment fall out. I'm doing just the opposite. I'm trying to to funnel it, to bring it all back together, and to move it through the neighborhood as quickly and efficiently as possible, which means, you know, the structures that we're doing are designed, you know, for very high velocity, to move a lot of water at a very high velocity. And if we do get sediment, and we do think that we'll get some sediment that comes from the forest, like we said, what we want to do is keep that moving through these structures, whether it's the channel or the storm drain. So we're kind of yin and yang, where he's trying to slow things down and I'm trying to speed things up, which is a real challenge. And then we're trying to put the brakes back on, you know, as we leave the neighborhood and approach the highway. So you guys are familiar with this. You know, we're looking at a 2 inches of rain in 45 minutes is kind of what we've targeted to look at in our improvements. And that's over 2,000 CFS that's coming into the subdivision at the very north end there. As Lucinda mentioned, you know, the water is splitting down the east side and down the west side. So our baseline for what Corey is talking about, you know, the no adverse impacts that he'll talk about, is what's happening right now after the fire, how the water is flowing on the east side and how it's flowing on the west side, and then comparing that to the improvements that we're making and making sure that there's no adverse impacts. Okay? So Lucinda mentioned, you know, we're trying to do this at warp speed, which means we're utilizing the existing channel alignments and the easements that we already have, which is really important, but it also creates some challenges for us hydraulically with the modeling, and we can talk about that a little bit. You know, and the biggest thing, you know, a couple of things I mentioned, ADOT's not on the same timeline with us, so their improvements won't happen till probably, I'm guessing, maybe 2 years after we're done. So that's another important factor for us. Like I said, we're really trying to speed things up, to get it through the neighborhood, to get it, you know, past everybody's houses. But then by the time we get to Lenox, you know, we're really trying to put the brakes on and make sure that we're not going to have adverse impacts on the highway. So Corey and his firm is that independent team that does this no adverse impacts modeling. And like Lucinda said, we've spent many iterations and with design and modeling on this to come up with a solution that really has no adverse impacts. So like I said, you know, we targeted that 2-inch 45-minute storm, more than 2,000 CFS. Getting that entire discharge to move through the subdivision, either in the channel or in the storm drain, you know, proved to not really be feasible, but we're close. You know, we're really close. So, you know, on the east side, we had talked before, nothing's really changed there. It's going to be a rectangular shotcrete channel with a 20-foot bottom width, a 3-foot minimum depth. There's going to be places, and we can look at the plans after, you know, afterwards. We have plans back there where it is going to be deeper. We need it to be deeper for hydraulic reasons. But we can get about 1,200 CFS in that channel during that 2-inch storm event. I think the greatest flow that we saw this summer was probably that first event, and that was around 1,000 CFS that rolled through. Not quite, probably close to 1,000, okay? We talked about the box culvert at Camino. Last time we talked about, the box culvert at Lenox as well and extending down to the highway, but we're going to be terminating our improvements and our channel out in the forest, short of Lenox, upstream of the highway. And the reason for that is primarily, we're trying to slow that water down before it hits the highway. ADOT's not ready for us to send that water towards them, and again, so we can look at that on the plans. We talked last time a little bit about a storm drain system, and we have those plans there as well. Going through the iterations on the modeling, we originally were at a 60-inch diameter storm drain. We've changed that to a 72-inch diameter storm drain, and that had to do with the no adverse impacts modeling. And that's about the biggest one that we can fit in there. So we're going to fit in a 72-inch diameter storm drain, and that's going to get us about another 500 CFS that we can carry down the west side there. So adding those two together, we're at about 1,700 CFS, which is a huge improvement to what was there. After Schultz, the channel that was there in Schultz was about 130 CFS. So we're going from about 130 to about 1,700. So these are the two alignments. Let me see, do we have no laser? Okay, so on the east side, again, like we talked about, the kind of looks like a snake, the channel with the snake head down there at the bottom. So that's our channel, that's in the existing easement, where the old channel used to be. But then here on the west side, you can see a little bit with the aerial imagery, that fan that comes down the west side. And then we're going to have a collection point where it comes out of the forest and where it comes out of Allen's Terminal Trench, that we'll drop that into a storm drain system. So the storm drain will run along the east and the north side of the road there, and then it's going to Chase, we've been talking, it's going to cut through Chase's property and Adson's property and ultimately tie into that channel down there. And that storm drain is going to sit in the roadside ditch. So there will be pickups on both sides of the roadside ditch. On the opposite side of the storm drain, we're going to replace all the driveway culverts all the way down there to get some a uniform system there. We're going to upsize those. There'll be 29-inch by 42-inch, a 36-inch equivalent pipe in there with a head wall on the upstream side of all of those. We had a lot of problems with damage during the flood event, so we'll improve that whole drainage system and then have some pickups, from the opposite side of the street going back into the storm drain as well. And again, we have plans that we can look at there. But those are really, we're trying to split it around the east and the west side essentially. A little bit, you've seen this before with that shotcrete channel that we talked about, a 20-foot bottom width, a 3-foot minimum depth, and then we'll have some sort of a fence on both sides of that to keep people out. Like I said, that water will be moving at 25, 30 feet per second when that channel's full, so it'll really be moving through there. A little bit, about what those plans for the channel looks like. We're utilizing that existing easement. Again, we have the plans back there. If you have any specific questions, we can look at those plans. Storm drain. So, like I mentioned, a 72-inch diameter storm drain pipe, where you see that note 4. Plans have been upgraded since this slide, but in that roadside channel where we're going to be redoing all those roadside channels, that storm drain will be sitting in that roadside channel. Okay, so a corrugated metal pipe that you can see the image up there, a large diameter, a 6-foot, 72-inch diameter pipe. It is a very smooth pipe. that lets water move very quickly through it. Again, very high velocities in that pipe when it's flowing full, pushing, 25, 30 feet per second when that thing is full. A little bit about what the storm drain plans look like. The blue that you see there is the storm drain. We will have pickups into the storm drain on the upstream side of all the driveways going down there. And we can take a look at what those pickups look like. So as the water's flowing down the channel, it'll drain down into the storm drain. And then, like I mentioned before, you can see, the culvert at the driveway, and then we'll have some pickups on the other side of the street to try to pull some of the water off the other side of the street as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey.
Thank you for coming out, and please let us know the questions you have as we're going through. As Lucinda touched upon, what we're trying to do a non-adverse impact analysis on is 26 times the flows that you were seeing before the fire. So it's a lot of flow spreading over a wide area, and we're trying to condense it to two sides on both sides of you. And so to meet the NAI, what we're looking at is 1 inch of rainfall, the 2 inches of rainfall, and 3 inches of rainfall within 45 minutes. And the 1 inch, just to kind of give you an idea of, that's kind of like a 50% chance of happening in any given year. 2 inch is more like 4% chance of happening. And 3 inches of rainfall within 45 minutes has about a 1% chance of happening in any given year. So that's kind of what we're looking at. When we're performing a non-adverse impact analysis, it's a floodplain management initiative developed by the Association of State Floodplain Managers. It doesn't mean that there's no development, there's no changes, but whatever changes you make, you don't want it to be adversely impacting those upstream or downstream of you. And you want to look at accumulation of all of the projects that you're doing and make sure that the accumulation of them doesn't have a negative impact either. So for our NAI, what we're going to be looking at primarily is our water depths and our water velocities. For the 1 inch rainfall event, we do not want to increase any water surface elevation outside of the flood corridor by more than 1/10 of a foot. We increase that to 1/2 a foot for the 2 inch event, 2 inches of rainfall. And then we increase that to, we don't want to see anything greater than 1 foot of rise in water depth for the 3 inch storm event. Water velocity, we want to look at anything that's over 3 feet per second, because at 3 feet per second, that's when you can start having erosion. It can affect grass's growth. You want to keep, for grass to grow, you want to keep under like 2 feet per second, if I recall. And so that's 3 feet per second. We want to make sure that we're not having, and if we have any velocities greater than that, we want to make sure that it's, after our modifications, we don't want it to increase by more than 1 foot per second or 10% of whatever it was before the project. So that's what my non-adverse impact analysis is looking at. The snapshot of the LiDAR also. So LiDAR is the survey that they did. They flew over and used measured light to basically find the elevation. And so that was a wide area, and they can do it rapidly and very accurately. And so that was done back in October of 2022. So that's our snapshot in time. So we're taking that snapshot and then comparing it to our projects with any other modifications that we're doing. So this is what our results are from it. So on the left side is from the 2022 LiDAR that I mentioned. If you had 1 inches of rainfall, that's what you would kind of expect. You would see a lot of flow coming down on the west side It was breaking out in a lot of these parcels right here, as you guys know, depositing a lot and then flowing on as well. You also had some going in the channel and then breaking out right here and spreading itself out through here. With the improvements, you can see there, this is all dried out now. So it's going into the storm drain right here and coming through here and exiting in the channel that's being constructed, will be constructed as well. You also have flows that are being contained fully within the channel here. So this is really good. I would say this is pretty close to what we've seen this past summer. So we would have containment within this model, assuming all the sediments dropped out, which is what the fan work upstream of it is doing, allowing that to allow flows to go through the system cleanly and efficiently. So it looks really good there. By the time we get to, so here's our criteria. So the yellow shows an increase from 0.1 to 0.5 feet. And the orange is 0.5 to a foot. And the red is anything greater than a foot increase in depth. So that's our criteria for the 1 inch event. So we have all 3 of those thresholds that we're looking at. And you can kind of see where it increases. We've widened out the flows. We're letting flows come out here. That's why we see this yellow in here. That's going to decrease the velocity and drop off sediment. The same is up in here, up in the upper portion of the fan. We're increasing the depth all the way across here. So this is what it was confined to previously, and we're spreading it out. Again, that's going to decrease your velocities and hopefully drop off all the sediment before it reaches down into the structures. This is our 2 inch of rainfall event, and this is what you would expect the result to happen in November of 2022. This is what we would expect to happen after the improvement. So we've dried it out a lot through here. We are going to be starting to overwhelm the channel. It's going to overtop through here and overtop at the road here as well as not all of it will be able to make it into the storm drain, but what will continue through here. So how does that compare in depth comparisons? So this is what it looks like. So primarily staying within the fan and within the channel for our increases in depths. We're picking up a little bit of red and oranges along the roadside drainage at this point because it's not all within the storm drain anymore, but the improvements along the roadside is containing that, and that's where we were seeing the depths. So I'll move on to the 3 inch event, which is the 1% chance of happening. And this is existing condition, pretty much inundated with water through the whole neighborhood. We're drying it out through the center, but again, we're overwhelming the system within the 3 inch event. And this is where we would expect an increase of water depth to occur within the parcels. So here, along the roadside drainage, we do expect that we're going to see increases in depths along the roadside right here, and the rest of it is contained within the system that we have designed. Yeah.
These calculations are done based off of the previous conditions, not as the conditions that we're going to.
That's correct. Yeah, so these conditions are the post-fire condition. So we would expect that as time progresses and these improvements are implemented, the fans will help. The watershed will recover. All of that stuff will decrease the flows as time progresses. And so like the 3 inches, or I'll just say the 1 inch, will become in another 5, 10, 15 years. We don't really know what that number is. It'll become more like the 2-inch rainfall event as far as what's going to be delivered downstream into our system. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the analysis I've been iterating through. And because anytime you push a little bit of flow that way, it has an adverse impact on this side. And it was just back and forth through a whole bunch of iterations. And we started off with a channel that was 3 feet deep through the whole thing, try to increase capacity where we could to allow more flow to go that way. We started off with original roadside drainage. That became a 5-foot storm drain, and that became a 6-foot storm drain. And just trying to fit within constraints and making modifications as we could to get the whole system to work together. So, thank you.
Thank you, Corey. And thank you, Chris and Alan. I don't need that. That's right. You know, again, this has really been a Herculean effort, and it looks like now you think, oh, that looks pretty simple, but let me tell you, it was painful. A lot of hard work, and I don't think Corey slept much in the last 3 weeks at all. You know, and we're, middle of the night we're talking. So, but this is pretty remarkable that we're able to manage this amount of water with no impacts. So. And it doesn't mean there won't be flooding, but no adverse impacts. That's what's important to understand. Yes, ma'am.
What phase are you going to start with first? What phase are you going to start with first, and when are you going to start?
Right now, the plan will be to construct south to north. Because if we start at the other end and work south, and we get into monsoon and we get events, then that becomes a problem, right? Then we're creating an impact. So we will start from south to north. And, right now I'm really hoping we're going to be into construction within 2 weeks. We really need to be into construction by May. That's the goal. So, but we do have a few more things to button up and get done and get resolved, and so we can move ahead. So and it's important to understand. Go ahead, Chris. Everything, all of this will be going on, concurrently, meaning the storm drain, the channel work, all of that, and all the work on forest will be going on. It's going to be like a massive beehive out there. All you're going to see is a lot of green trucks running around and a lot of yellow iron. And that's why I'm saying, really be careful. Be careful with your animals, your children. And, Tiffany does a good job. They're very safe. They have an amazing safety record. But they're moving, and they're going to need everybody to cooperate. So, don't leave cars out in the street. Don't, be really conscious about what you're doing. I know most of you already are. So, but be really conscious so that we don't in any way affect their ability to progress as quickly as they can. So we're going to get into construction as soon as we can. So in terms of how we're paying for this, and ultimately this is probably going to be about, with On Forest, we're up over 15 million just for this corridor. So the channel itself and increasing the depth and the improvements to the channel, the shotcrete, that's coming through the NRCS, 75% NRCS, 25% flood control district. The storm drain is all flood control district. And so that, and the cost to improve the roadside ditches as well, and the culverts at the driveways and the inlets and everything associated with that is all going to be picked up by the district. The crossing at Camino, that actually is going to be paid for by Public Works because that's a county road. But Tiffany's doing all the work. It doesn't matter. But so you understand some of the complexity here on the financial side, and then of course everything on forest is being paid for completely by the Forest Service. So yes.
I just have a question for the engineers.
Let's let him go first. He's got the mic, and you go next.
North of the neighborhood where the water flow is split, is that split a 50-50, or is it the major diversion goes to the east first and then down the west side? How does that work?
It's not 50-50.
Here, you got to have a mic here.
Yeah, it's not 50-50. The bigger diversion goes towards the east and down the open concrete channel. But that concrete channel has a limited amount of ability to carry water. It's a lot, but at some point it overflows. And so we have to kind of meter it out a little bit on both sides, and so that there will be flow. You'll see that the east side channel is not full before the west side starts to flow and go to the storm drain. And that is, it'd be nice if it was simple, but because when we get up into the higher flows where we start to spill out of both the storm drain and we want to spill that out where it was going before to meet the no adverse impact. And so it doesn't go 50-50. It goes mostly to the east, and then it goes down but it will start going down to the west sooner than it did before. But we have the storm drain that can take that water. And then it starts to spread out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to that end, so the numbers that Chris shared, I think, we're probably getting somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 in the channel, and then in the storm drain, around 500 CFS. So that's kind of to understand the split. And the constraints, the area we have to put the storm drain, the other big constraint on the channel is the AT&T fiber optic line. It cannot be relocated. We're very limited what we can do with that. So that actually sets the floor of that channel. We can't go deeper. So, a few places we can go a little bit deeper to get around the curves, but beyond that, in that area, we can't go deeper.
What would be the mechanism for coordinating? Can you guys hear me okay without the microphone?
But we're recording, so you need to say it into the...
What would be the mechanism for road closures and driveway closures and coordinating that with the various
Yeah, for those of you that were out there before, Tiffany did a very good job in coordinating the driveway and road closures, and they will do their best to give you a look ahead as best they can. Yeah.
Pretty much every day, you guys will get to know my people very well. We'll get with you and say, okay, tomorrow morning I need you to take a right instead of a left. When you come home, you probably want to go down by Chase's house. We'll be very vocal with you, letting you know what to expect to see. Especially getting along the section with that big pipe going through. That's going to be quite a big ditch. So large tractors, large shoring. So every day the foreman will be walking out ahead, letting you know, hey, Bob, you're not going to be able to get in your driveway today. Can you park over here? So you'll be hearing a lot from us. We've got some teams, we got some people that we've hired that will just be informing you what to expect to see for the next couple of days.
Will there be opportunities to receive emails?
For
example, if we leave town for a day and we come back at 2:00 and
we can for sure set something up. So I'll get with my staff and start figuring out how to do so. And it's not a bad idea. We'll be proactive with that.
And I think he can communicate with us, and Sean can be getting out information to the community. But there is some work that's going to be very specific to each property, right, as they move along. And they're going to be moving. So I don't think the disruption to any given driveway is going to be super long, but they have to get it in there. They have to weld the pipe, put in the inlets, all that. So there's a process, and they're going to do the best they can to work with you. Oh, yes, sir.
So
Here, let's get it on tape, sir.
I might be speaking a little ahead. But once the channels and the storm drains all said and done, is there going to be a maintenance schedule for the storm drains and everything? And what
Yeah,
is it?
absolutely. And we would expect that particularly the first couple of years, probably most of the maintenance will be on Forest. They will continue to probably have to take material off fans, the lower fans in particular, and continue to maintain those terminal trench, that type of thing. And depending on how successful everything is upstream in terms of reducing the sediment. The storm drain, this water's moving. I mean, if we get, frankly, the worst case for the storm drain is a lot of small events that just kind of creep along. We've had a storm drain in Paintbrush since Schultz, and we've never cleaned it out. Last year, at one point, Mike, they looked at it. I don't forget if they scoped it or however, but anyway, and it was clean. There was nothing in there. The water had moved through, so it's going to be moving quite a bit. So, and he'll know if there's going to be an issue, but we'll take a look at it after each season, even if we haven't had any issues, right? So, but yeah, there's going to be some level of maintenance to this. We're trying to build this to make the least amount of maintenance, obviously, as we can. So, yes, sir.
I missed the last meeting, so I understood that drive area going across Lennox is going to be enlarged too, larger drain.
Right now, Lennox will not be improved. The crossing at Lennox will not be improved at this time because we can't improve Lennox until ADOT improves their inlet and the crossing. It just physically can't work because it won't physically work. And we would definitely then be creating impacts to the highway. So, unfortunately, there will be impacts at Lennox. And, Public Works will be out there and we'll get it cleared and get you back in there as quickly as we can. But it's, we're going to have to go through. They're saying they will, their goal is to try to have that dealt with by next year, but we don't even have a commitment they're going to deal with it still. Tomorrow morning, we're meeting to share all of this with them and to show that you had 4,000 CFS at the highway, you still got 4,000, figure it out. Took them 6 months to get a contractor on board, and don't get me started.
Well, no one on Lennox had any problems. It was all at the roadway at 89, under that culvert.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge, and Chris did a phenomenal job trying to manage how to release that water out of the channel and the storm drain and reduce down the impacts downstream. But there probably, if we get bigger events, there are going to be impacts. I'm not going to stand here and lie to you. There will be, and we're just going to do the best we can. We'll keep patching, and then once they get their crossing and inlet, he's got a design for it. It's ready. We're ready to rock when they're ready. So.
Yeah, just real quickly, kind of the head of the snake that you see there is where the channel ends. That rectangular channel will end there. And then what we're doing, we're essentially trying to spread the water back out and slow it down. And so that was part of Corey's modeling where we're not going to have adverse impacts at Lennox. We don't have any adverse impacts. What we're trying to do is simulate basically what's happening now. And I know what's happening now isn't necessarily a good situation, but it would be far worse if we just ran the channel up to Lennox and then just stopped it and let it do what it would do. So, you can still expect impacts at Lennox, but no adverse impacts by virtue of what we're doing.
Yeah. And where that fans out there, that's all Forest Service property in there for those of you that don't know. So Jim had a question.
I had a couple of questions. We experienced a lot of water within the subdivision, obviously last year, and in the modeling, it doesn't show that much. So I guess my question would be for Alan, are you expecting you can control this debris to some extent, and it's not going to be jamming up once we get into the subdivision or any of your retention terminal trenches right there above the subdivision? Because if we get a major event and we get all this debris, I mean, logs and trees and boulders and rocks, you know what I'm talking about. All bets are off in terms of how this is going to work. And it seems like it's forced into the center of the subdivision, and then we get significant impact on all the ditches along the roads in the subdivision.
Right. So great question. All of the work, I mean, all of the work that we're doing on the forest is specifically for sediment and debris reduction. The fans, that high fan, you know, every time we built a fan, we've been able to model 85 to 95% reduction in materials to get across the fan. That's 2,200 feet long. We feel pretty good about that. Now, it can pick up more debris as it comes down through that channel, and the channel restoration that we're doing through there will probably have an order of magnitude or better at sediment reduction, just by the nature of the work and by what we've modeled in the past. And then we've greatly expanded the fan beyond the initial fan above the neighborhood, both in length, 600 feet upstream towards the 420 road, and in width down below by more than doubling the width of the fan. So we have a lot more area to collect stuff, but then we do get to the terminal trench, and the terminal trench is supposed to divide that water. And when we go back and you want to look at that, the terminal trench has been redesigned so it slopes slightly uphill and then has a slope in the bottom of it so that it can help keep itself clean. And beyond that, it doesn't even extend entirely across the entire fan anymore. We have an open width on the western side that allows water to come down the west side and not be captured in that trench and not be funneled towards the open channel where it can overflow. And that's why that pipe flow, you'll see pipe flow before that final thing is open, or before it fills up. We'll start seeing pipe flow in the storm drain on the west side. So I can't say that you're not going to see debris, but we have an awful lot more infrastructure in place on the forest to reduce that debris, and we're going up to reduce the source as well. So conditions, I guarantee you when this is done, conditions will be better than what you saw last summer. Whether they're going to be perfect I can guarantee they won't be perfect. But every time we built a fan, we show an 85 to 95% reduction. And we saw that even in the undersized fan above at Lenox this year. I mean, the Tiffany boys moved about 15,000 cubic yards of material off of that would have been in the neighborhood or the channels, which is huge.
Right, but they were up there many, 10, 12, 15 times. I don't like it. I don't know how many. It's 13, okay. So do you expect they're going to have to be that active up there in that terminal trench this year to maintain it and dig it out?
I'd say in the next several years, that we're going to see they would probably have to clean that trench out, once a year or something like that. Maybe more if we have a really active season like we did last year. But they have a place to clean it out that is not your yard, and that's what we're aiming for.
And I think, one of the other points to that is the size of the events, right? And if we get a really big event, that will pull material down outside the footprint that we have worked, right? And we had a conversation today with the Forest Service about what can we do generally in that area, what could be done generally across the burn area and non-burn areas, because there's still area up there that hasn't burned or burned light or moderately, to reduce down a lot of the dead and down that's up there. And they are looking at that and working on a plan, from what we understand, to help, to address some of that. And Mike knows that I want all that debris at wherever we can legally get on the property where we're cleared, that he's getting rid of everything. Because we know if we get a really big event, it will end up in the system, right? Just like when we had the 1,000-year event in Brandis, everything that had come down in that window of time from probably about 13, 14 down, it came into the system, and it plugged the bridges, and but that was obviously that was a 6-inch storm, so that was a big storm. So, but yeah, the size of the storms will really dictate that to a very large extent, how much debris comes. Yes, ma'am.
So to that point, will the IMA work be sequenced after the rest of the work, or is it also going to be concurrent on our individual properties?
We haven't really talked about that. I will tell you that the #1 priority is getting the channel and the storm drain done. That is the true mitigation system. And so we will focus on that for sure. But, we also, they'll have in their hands, those plans as well. And frankly, while they're at that area, it behooves them a lot of times just to do it while they're right there rather than moving equipment around. But it all depends on what they need in terms of equipment. Some of these, a lot of you have, some situations that it isn't going to be a lot of work. A lot of additional work might be bringing in soil and compacting the soil, so that you can then replant the berms around the over the barrier and that type of thing if you choose to. If you want to see a lot of what this looks like, if you go down to Paintbrush, that's at the southern end of Timberline, we did a lot of similar kind of work there. And overall, except for, frankly, a property where they had removed part of their mitigation, it worked really well this last year through summer. I think we only had one property hit really hard, and it was the property where the upstream neighbor had elected to remove that mitigation. And so within those CAs, there will be a specified time frame, and the property owner is required to maintain that. So, because it becomes part of your property in effect. So, all right, other questions? Good questions. Any other particularly general questions that you have? And then again, we'll break. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Time frame, if with perfect weather, what do you think the time frame would be for completion?
Well, it's going to be 2.5 months from whenever they can start. And they may start at one, right now it's wherever we get the clearance from the NRCS will come on the 29th. And is what he's trying to speed that up. He's literally reaching out to every tribe and the Forest Service. I'm going to follow up with the Forest Service as well to get the final concurrence on the clearance for that. And I think other than, his timing with getting contractors and he's got a sub that's going to do the shotcrete and everything, that we should be able to green light that hopefully the 30th.
So what everybody can know and what to expect, I'm going to give you everything I got. You're going to see possibly 100 men on this job working directly on your fans for you. We'll be working 6-7 days a week, and we'll get everything we can get done. I'm not guaranteeing you that I'm not going to make monsoons, but I can tell you I'm going to go down swinging. So we're going to give you everything that we got. As the team has put together the plans, they've been working themselves tirelessly trying to get me on the grade. You have no idea what a powerhouse this woman is on getting things done. So
It's a team. We've got a great team.
What I'm
Yeah.
telling you, just so that you can expect, and it, you will, at some point, you will see upwards of 100 men on this site. You're gonna see mixer trucks, you're gonna see dump trucks, you're gonna see loaders. I'll finally get my D9 out of Phil's yard. So, expect of a lot of activity. There's gonna be a lot going on. We're gonna do our best that we can to communicate with you. Please be patient in the fact, understanding to get to where I need to be as fast as I need to be, there's going to be a lot of pieces in motion.
Yeah,
But
it's going to be probably 7 days a week.
and it's going to be 7 days a week.
Long days.
And it's going to be dusk to dark, and we're just going to keep doing what we can to make sure you folks are taken care of, just like we did all through monsoon season. You'll get tired of seeing me, but we will give you my absolute best, guaranteed.
You've got the best. There's nobody else that could do this beyond Tiffany. So they know where all the utilities are out there. They've got the knowledge to really move as quickly as possible. So, but they're, we can't dictate weather. We can't dictate other issues that may surface. We're going to just do the best we can. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and break. And then certainly please come over and look at the plans. And probably in those conversations, Rick Schroeds is the one looking a lot at the individual, the integrated mitigation areas, those individual lot mitigation efforts. And so he can talk with you about those too. And again, fortunately with what we're doing, it's not a huge number. So thank you very much. Really appreciate everybody coming out.